Dacre Stoker's books are on there. John French has a book on there.
Yep.
And Rice has. Baron would
Books,
remind us all.
Anne Rice, Stephanie Stephanie Meyer.
The less said about Meyer, the better. I think we all agree about that. But it's a really great resource. There's a ton of stuff on there. I use it all the time at work. I'm just finishing an oldie but a goodie favorite of mine, which is I. Strahd, Memoirs of a Vampire by P.N. Elrod.
Oh,
and
excellent author.
Starting up on Of Dice and Men, which is a history of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh.
I've gotten into it a little. It's really exciting. There's a ton of stuff on there to check out.
Definitely.
So do it. Go to the link. It's in the description. You'll be glad you did. We'll be glad that you did too, because it helps us out.
Yes. Please use our link.
Yes. The other thing I think that's worth bringing up now, as well as at the end, would be that starting the 25th of May, here in New Jersey, in Trenton, we're going to be doing paranormal classes. They're going to be Saturdays from 2 to 4 p.m. First one's the 25th. You can find information on the Facebook group and on the meetup group, Ghost Hunting and Demonology, in either place. There'll be links in the description, of course. First class is going to be $10. They're going to be $20 a class after that. We're going to cover a lot of subjects, both practical and theoretical. About 30 classes altogether. If you want to buy them all, let me know. We can work something out. And keep in mind, we'll be talking more about that as we get closer, given we've got a week left before the event. But tonight, let's get into our topic, which is cults. The first obvious question is, what's a cult?
Yes.
You want to take the stab?
What makes a cult? I would say a group of like-minded individuals based around a particular individual. With, I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what the definition is.
And you're absolutely right.
It's kind of tough because it goes from, to me, the Catholic Church could be a cult.
Actually, by a lot of standards, the Catholic Church is... I'm not personally going to say the Catholic Church is a cult. I don't agree, and I'm going to get to why. But by a lot of definitions, yes, it is. There's a channel out there called Telltale Atheist who does a lot of stuff on cults. I don't always agree with his conclusions, but for factual information, he's pretty good. And he rates the Catholic Church as a cult.
Oh, so there we go.
And there's Steve Hassan's bite model, which we're going to get into, that I drew up on Facebook, on the internet, I should say, not Facebook. But by that, depending on how you look at it, as a cult. And here's the thing. Brian's absolutely right, and I did deliberately put him on the spot because, well, I'm a jerk. But it's very hard to define exactly what the word cult means, because for a start, you'd have to really define what a religion is, and nobody can agree on that either.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line between, what's a cult and what's a religion. Yeah. Generally, legitimacy comes into play, and that's only... if you're using legal definitions.
What's a religion versus what's a philosophy?
That one I think is a little clearer. I think a religion requires some form of a spiritual belief. It requires some form of faith, whereas a philosophy is more of a set of tenets of beliefs and ethics.
But what about religions that don't actually require a belief? There are forms of Buddhism that require no belief in a supernatural force.
See, I tend to look at them more as philosophies than...
But they have rituals,
religions.
They have a belief in an afterlife. They have all the qualities that are generally associated with religion. That's why the definitions start to break down.
So it is, it is definitely a blurred line.
Case in point, you want a group that absolutely rejects the spiritual, but in every other, if you didn't talk about the spiritual, just talked about it as a whole, fits every other definition of a religion, communism.
Mm-hmm.
They have a great dedication to a cause there, and historically they've been willing to die for that cause, but they reject the existence of God or anything like God.
Right.
And the answer is, we don't know. The definition of cult I've always preferred is a religion that is different than the cultural norm. And more specifically, a new religion that's different than the cultural norm. So by this definition, every religion at one point in its history was a cult.
Yeah.
Um,
Most religions start as a cult.
Realistically, any definition of a cult, all religions probably started as a cult. Because Christianity, one single leader that everyone followed, or gathered around.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism, one single leader everyone gathered around, very charismatic. Both require you to make large life choices, give away your goods. Although, of course, the difference with Buddha and Jesus and the modern cult idea of a cult leader is they said give away your goods and give them to the poor and the needy and to charity.
Right.
They didn't say give it to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's another thing. The word cult nowadays has a very specific negative connotation, which you can trace back to Jonestown, and the David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, on Shinrinko,
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, Heaven's Gate, and all these other mass tragedies that have happened. There are millions of religions out there that are, or thousands, maybe not millions, maybe even millions. I'm not sure anyone knows, that qualify as a cult by most definitions, that are not predatory or not destructive, that don't commit mass suicide, that don't even necessarily require you to give all your money to the person. They may require you to give it away or give it into a communal group where you actually all share it. So being a cult by any definition is not necessarily a bad one. The more important distinction, I think, is between a religion or cult, whatever you want to call it, and a destructive group, which is where I think Stephen Hassan's bite model comes in handy. He divides it into 4 categories. Okay. And then if in all 4 categories it's very high, then you're dealing with a destructive cult. And of course, the 4 are BITE, behavior control. Does it promote dependence and obedience, modify behavior with rewards and punishments, dictate where and with whom you live, restrict or control sexuality, control clothing and hairstyle, regulate what and how much you eat or drink, deprive you of 7 to 9 hours of sleep, exploit you financially, restrict leisure time activities, require you to seek permission for major decisions. Information control, deliberately withhold or distort information, forbid you from speaking with ex-members and critics, discourage access to non-cult sources of information, divide information into insider versus outsider doctrine, generate and use propaganda extensively, use information gained in confession sessions against you, gaslight you to make you doubt your own memory, require you to report things, feelings, and activities to superiors, encourage you to spy and report on others' misconduct. Thought control, instill black versus white, us versus them, good versus evil thinking, change your identity, possibly even your name, use loaded language and cliches to stop complex thought, induce hypnotic or trance states to indoctrinate, teach thought-stopping techniques to prevent critical thoughts, allow only positive thoughts, use excessive meditation, singing, prayer, and chanting to block thoughts, reject rational analysis, critical thinking and doubt, and then emotional control, which is instill irrational fears, phobias of questioning or leaving the group, label some emotions as evil, worldly, sinful, or wrong, teach emotion-stopping techniques to prevent anger, homesickness, promote feelings of guilt, shame, and unworthiness, shower you with praise and attention, love bombing, threaten your friends and family, shun you if you disobey or disbelieve, teach that there's no happiness or peace outside of the group. And it's worth noting...
Do the Amish qualify by that standard? I mean, it's...
Yeah, they fit a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of that and various other groups.
And I think the key thing with how Hassan pointed out is, a group that fits a number of these things is not necessarily bad. There's lots of positive groups that fit a number of these things, in each category, no less. But if you're taking most of them, it's probably a good time to take a step back and reflect. Again, it may not, and that doesn't necessarily mean evil. Although there are certain things. I mean, especially I think shunning is the idea that you have to, and you find this in the Amish. But you don't just find this in the Amish. It's also very common in Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah,
where you do not, if somebody is excommunicated or otherwise removed, disfellowshipped is a term that the Jehovah's Witnesses use. You can't talk to them. You can't have anything to do with them. If they're your child, you can't call them to make sure they're alive or dead.
Yeah, if they're not one of us, they're nobody.
Yeah. Well, not just that. Often you get, particularly with witnesses in some other groups, if they were one of us and they rejected us, they're less than nobody.
Yeah.
Because there's this idea that, you have to convert other people that don't agree with you, that don't believe what you do. But that idea that if somebody's rejected your beliefs, you can't have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And this gets taken to insane lengths in some places. There's another model I think that's much simpler that I also really like, which is from Robert Snow's book on cults. So Robert Snow is actually, I think, the very first guest I ever had on the show 4 years ago. And I had mostly had him on because he had this fascinating experience involving past life. I actually want to reach out and see if we can get him on again because he was that good.
Okay.
But he also wrote a book about destructive cults. And his line of what's a destructive cult, what's not something to worry about, is has it done something illegal?
Well, that's usually what the government uses.
Well, the cults in and of themselves aren't illegal. They can't make it illegal to be a member of a cult or even to start a cult because that would be a giant violation of the First Amendment.
Right.
But is it a problem? Does kind of come down to, well, look at what it does. And a lot of the groups, a lot of very destructive cults, and the ones that we're going to wind up talking about tonight, and I'm going to pick on, and yes, I chose Jehovah's Witnesses for a reason, are guilty of some horrible criminal offenses.
Right.
And that's,
which was mentioned in the past.
This is true. But there's another thing I kind of want to get into that I think ties into this. Because a lot of people listening and a lot of people who watch videos about cults and things like that often ask themselves, it's like, how can anybody fall for this? Because when you listen to some of it sounds like, look at the the Heaven's Gate cult. They believed that Jesus was coming back on a spaceship that was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. That they all had to commit suicide so they could go join him on the spaceship. In fact, they all wore name tags, Heaven's Gate away team in direct Star Trek reference. And tragically enough, I just found out last night from a video I was watching doing research. Apparently, a relative of Nichelle Nichols from the original Star Trek was among the people.
Oh, wow.
And to an outsider, this sounds kind of nuts. I mean,
yeah, but they didn't start out that way.
To quote Star Trek, why does God need a starship? And you're absolutely right. It didn't start out that way. Most cults, when you look at them, start out pretty innocuous. They start out as religious groups or Bible studies. They start out often doing very good things. A perfect example of this is Jim Jones. Jim Jones, nobody's going to argue now is a monster.
Yeah.
He orchestrated the mass suicide of 900 people and several more being shot, all on his orders. But when he started out, he was seen as a hero because he was fighting hard for desegregation. He preached, he railed at the pulpit about how racism and segregation were immoral. He adopted children of a range of ethnicities. He called it his rainbow family and said, now, segregation is a personal matter to me because I don't want my child to go through this. And a lot of other cult leaders start out the same. They start out doing quite reasonable things, quite rational things. And what they originally are saying can sound very reasonable, especially because here's the other thing. People think that people who join a cult are dumb, ignorant, easy to fool. The majority, actually, psychological studies of cult members have shown even among destructive cults, most cult members are actually above average intelligence.
Yeah. You need a certain open-mindedness.
Yeah. And it has to do with the nature of deception. You see this, too, with a lot of conspiracy theories. You see this with multi-level marketing groups that run very similarly to cults. You see this with a lot of fringe beliefs, fringe groups. Anti-vaxxers are another one. These aren't stupid people, but cult leaders and people that are parts of these various movements play on that. Because the reality is, a lot of very intelligent people know that they're very intelligent and are a little arrogant about that. If you play to that arrogance, they're more likely to listen to you. Well, only very smart people will understand this. The average Christian doesn't get it. That's why you need to join us. They also pick on people. They also tend to choose people that are isolated in some way. Very common people to join cults are college students, particularly college freshmen, because they're away from home. They may be in a distant city. They might even be in another country. They don't know anybody.
Yeah, they're looking for connections.
Now you have this group of people that are very close-knit, that do a lot of things together, that are all very kind to the person, very interested in what that person, in that person. There's a technique, and it referred to it in the bite model I went over, called love bombing, where when that person shows up, everybody acts interested, everybody's friendly, welcoming. That person is the most interesting thing in the world. And part of this is easy to mistake, because there is that natural thing when you first join a group that a lot of people are, oh, you're the new person, new guy. So what's your story? What brought you here tonight? Everybody's asking you questions because you're new and interesting, as opposed to the person who's been there 100 times before. And when you're away from home and you don't have the support structure you normally have, that's very easy to fall for. Because especially, it's hard to tell between, are people genuinely nice, or is there some ulterior motive?
Yeah.
And a lot of cult members, not necessarily leaders, may very well be genuinely nice people that actually just want to get to know you.
Yeah. They want to bring people in.
Yeah. And it's step by step. It's a progression. And, well, okay, here, let's talk about this part of the Bible people don't talk about. Let's talk about this special insight. Oh, our leaders are special. How many people that are seen as mainstream have claimed special power from God? And the entire charismatic movement is built on being able to get these abilities directly from God, the ability to speak in tongues. And oh, wow, is that a subject to get into another night? And faith healing and deliverance ministry. And some of the charismatic movement does become a cult. Some of it is on the fringier side. And certainly there's lots of charismatics that are not actually engaging in the worst end of cult behavior, where you have to give them all your money and thought control, and ultimately you're going to wind up all drinking Flavor Aid laced with cyanide. But again, it's that special ability, and there's the verses in the Bible you can cite that all say, well, God gives these gifts to believers, and it's a progression of okay. Jesus said he was coming back. Well, could this person who seems so nice and so caring and so loving and talks about problems in the world that I want to see change, could they be the return of the Christ? It's a combination of manipulation, and especially getting longer and further you go into it, sleep deprivation, being deprived of food, and it becomes easier and easier and just to listen. There are similarities, I think, with the whole idea of Stockholm Syndrome of, you start to identify with these people.
Well, there's a reason why they isolate as well.
Yeah.
They take you away from outside influences, and the less you hear any sort of criticism or other thought, it becomes easier and easier to get into the groupthink.
Yeah, and again, John's Sons is a great example, a huge example of this. He moved them all to a foreign country, onto a compound. He convinced them that the government was coming for them, that a nuclear war was coming, and they needed to get out of the U.S. To avoid the nuclear fallout. And especially because this is what, the 70s, 60s?
This was, I think it was the 70s.
Yeah, this is the height of the Cold War, when that was a serious concern for a lot of people. And, even aside from that, not for nothing, look at Harold Camping, who convinced a lot of people the world was going to end. And when he was wrong, he convinced them he miscalculated and it was a different date. And when he was wrong again, he did it a third time.
Yeah.
And people still believed him. It's very easy to sit and think.
Manson had a cult.
Oh, yes, very much.
I mean, You know, talk about destructive cults.
Yeah, the Manson family is a perfect example. But they fulfill a need people have. They play on people's ego. Because another thing that's very common with cults is this idea of secret knowledge. We know something everyone else doesn't. And if that plays to people's ego, I know something you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes advantage of that. And again, it's a progression. And even for the cult leaders, they don't all start out looking to commit, mass suicide, genocide. It seems from what I've read and listened to from that he just fell, with Jones, he fell into his own paranoid fantasies.
Yeah. I mean, clearly he didn't start off as a bad guy.
No, and that's the thing. Nobody they start out with good intentions. Mm. A lot of these people start out thinking they can change the world for the better.
I mean, not Manson.
Yeah.
Manson was a psychopath.
In his mind, he wasn't the bad guy.
Oh no, he was never the bad guy, but he was a psychopath. He was a manipulator. Yeah. He didn't care as long as he got what he wanted. It was all about him.
And he was convinced there was a conspiracy against him, just like Jones, just like a lot of the other ones. Conspiracy theories directly relate to cults. There's a very similar mindset, and it's not hard. Probably we're getting up on the half-hour mark. We probably
almost
about time to get into some more specific examples.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about Jonestown, which is good. It's the biggest loss of American life, civilian life specifically, because obviously they were in the military prior to 9/11. And for that matter, the other thing I think that deserves more attention than it gets is Leo Ryan, the congressman who gave his life, one, trying to investigate what the heck was going on down there, and then two, he was bringing people who wanted to escape. He brought down. So the story, for anyone who knows, is that Leo Ryan had heard all these disturbing rumors. He knew a lot. He had heard from people that were related to members of the Jonestown cult, and he flew with several of the family members down to find out what was going on. Talked to Jones, talked to the family. A few people that wanted to leave, he took them with him, and Jones ordered that his men to go out and shoot Ryan and the rest of the people that were leaving, and then ordered that the white what do they call it? White Knights, white drills. But basically, for months beforehand, he had people preparing that they'd get out of bed in the middle of the night. There'd be sirens going off, and they'd all have to drink the cyanide-laced Flavor Aid. Or the Kool-Aid. Everybody thinks of it as Kool-Aid. It wasn't actually Kool-Aid. It was basically Flavor Aid, which is the same thing, different name.
Knockoff brand.
Yeah. And then ultimately, guess what? It wasn't actually. It was preparation for when the government came for them, that they were going to commit suicide. They didn't actually have cyanide in those first doses. And then finally, Ryan does it. He sends his men to kill him. And then he gives the order to drink to actually drink the cyanide. And that's when hundreds of people together committed suicide, all on this man's say-so. And Ryan, I think, deserves more credit as the fact he was a hero. He risked his life and ultimately gave his life trying to help people. Who says all politicians are bad?
No, every now and then there's a good one. There's a true person that gets elected that actually wants to do some good.
Granted, I know nothing of Ryan other than that. I don't know his positions. I don't know.
Yeah,
but he did at least one very very noble thing. And then of course Heaven's Gate's another well-known example we've been talking about. Shinrinko's an interesting one that people these days I don't think talk about as often.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it.
It was the biggest reason probably Americans don't talk about it as much as it's a Japanese group. It was a doomsday cult led by a man who claimed not only to be the return of Jesus Christ, but he claimed to be the return of Buddha. He was a reincarnation of Buddha and Jesus Christ.
It was a 2-for-1 deal.
Which fits, and that may sound odd to Westerners, but that does actually fit into some Buddhist and Hindu beliefs that Jesus was in fact. So there's a Hindu deity called Krishna, who comes to Earth in many avatars, or excuse me, Vishnu is the deity. The most famous of his avatars is Krishna. There are a number of Hindus that believe that eventually Vishnu incarnated as Jesus and then he incarnated as Buddha. So it's not a unique thing to this group.
Is this where the Hare Krishna
I don't
come from? That whole. Because I've always wondered about that.
It's a particular deity. This particular deity known as Krishna, who's very important in Buddhism. The most famous, although it's by no means the only holy text in Hinduism, is the Bhagavad Gita, which is about Krishna. And there's a whole other thing with people that think that Krishna was the basis for Christ, which is extremely incorrect. But you have these ideas. But yeah, Ashara is the guy's name. I'm trying to find his full name. Who claimed this, and he ultimately led Shoko Ashara. He founded the Shinriko in 1984, and planned a Tokyo attack on the Tokyo subway using a nerve gas known as sarin gas in 1995.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, that's what most people remember, and apparently he did a smaller one the year before. What's interesting is that it's not the only attack he was working on. There was attempts to attack the United States even. Specifically, for listeners and you yourself, given you're my age, and I just managed to remember this. You may remember back in the day that you'd have the trucks that would come through town with the pesticides. Mm-hmm. They were going to load those up on the west coast of the U.S. with sarin gas instead of the normal pesticides that were being used to try to kill people.
Yeah.
Another reason that probably he doesn't get that much attention is the attack, as infamous as it was, only killed 12 people. And then it severely injured 50 more, some of whom did die later. And then about 1,000 others had temporary vision problems. For what was almost the ideal conditions for a chemical weapons attack, because it was a tightly enclosed area with limited ventilation and exit routes, it didn't actually kill that many people. And what's interesting is he's currently in prison, and he denies any involvement in the attacks. The cult does still exist, though they have distanced themselves from Shoko Ashara and just continue the belief systems. One of the other ones, and I've referenced it a few times tonight, and I think it's worth noting why I pick on them, is of course Jehovah's Witnesses.
Why not pick on them?
Well, the average rank and file members of Jehovah's Witnesses are often nice enough people that they honestly believe that if you don't believe what they tell you is the truth, that very soon there's going to be an apocalyptic war, Armageddon, and everyone who doesn't agree with them is going to die. And they're different from one of the many differences from mainstream Christianity is they believe in what's called annihilationism. There is no hell. You die, you're gone forever. You never come back. The true believers of Jehovah's Witnesses and precursors in Christianity that are following the true path according to them will be brought back, will be resurrected. But other than that, death is a cessation of existence. There is no torture.
That's something at least.
Yeah, and they have a bunch of fairly. There are some odd ideas in terms of. I'm not going to say they're not Christians. They certainly follow some of the teachings of Jesus Christ. But there are particular reasons I take issue with Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, theologically, I don't agree with them. But there's lots of people I don't agree with, I don't take issue with. There's two big problems I have with them. One is the fact that they refuse blood transfusions. Mm-hmm. Because the Bible says that that we are not to consume blood. This is a problem. Theologically, this is a problem for two reasons. One is it's talking about dietary laws.
Yeah.
And that also means you shouldn't be consuming pork or shellfish and a whole bunch of other restrictions that Jehovah's Witnesses don't follow. But there's also a concept that I wish more Christians followed that Jesus himself did from Judaism called Parish Negev. according to Persh Negev, in the case of a life or death situation,
Right.
you can ignore the laws. A Jewish person, the Hasidic was ultra conservative by the the Torah says that I do it. Jew will eat pork if it's a question of eating pork or starving to death. And not only will they probably not feel guilty about it, their rabbi will tell them they did the right thing. Because in Judaism, life is sacred, and you do not do something. You don't kill yourself. And Jesus himself taught based on this. It was against the law in Jesus' time, for example, to gather food on the Sabbath. When his followers were hungry, he fed them. It was against the law to heal the sick. He healed those who were suffering. And modern Judaism, doctors are explicitly excluded from the laws of the Sabbath, even if it's just a question of lessening pain. It doesn't have to be a life or death situation. Children, and here's the thing: adults, if for some bizarre reason you want to ignore Persh Negev, ignore the specificness of what the Bible says about blood, fine. But for God's sakes, don't subject your children to this foolish nonsense. Children have died because of the ban on blood transfusions. There's an even bigger problem, unfortunately. I was raised Roman Catholic. I fell away from Catholicism because I disagreed with its teachings. I've since come to not disagree as strongly with some of the teachings I once did, although there's others I do disagree with. But one reason I would never go back to being a Roman Catholic is child molestation. Here's the thing. It isn't as widely talked about, but there is a massive worldwide cover-up within the Jehovah's Witnesses organization of rampant child abuse and child molestation. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and look it up. The Australian Royal Commission had a massive lawsuit, fined them millions of dollars.
Yeah, you've mentioned that.
Yeah. And just like with the priests, where the Catholic Church just shuffles the accused priests to other dioceses, they shuffle the witnesses around. They've condemned the Catholic Church for doing the same thing. One of the other things they do that's unsettling is they go in, like a lot of other Christian groups, they go into the church, into the prisons to work with prisoners, and particularly they'll work with child molesters. Child molesters get out, they're welcomed into the congregations without warning people what's been led into the congregation. I very much, as a Christian, am a believer in the idea, the importance of the idea of redemption, and that people can be redeemed, but you don't put a child molester among children.
No.
Don't send them knocking door to door on houses. And yeah, lots of people find Jehovah's Witnesses showing up on their door annoying. I don't blame them. I kind of find I actually like. I'll stand there and have a friendly chat with them. I miss the fact I haven't seen one in years. But if you have a problem with that, let me give you some advice on what to do. And this will actually work. This, listening to ex-members about how to get them to stop showing up. Don't threaten them. Don't insult them. Don't be rude to them. They get that all the time. Be not, try to be civil. It doesn't hurt you to just try to be civil. These people honestly believe that they're trying to save your life. Whether you agree with them or not, respect the spirit in which they come to you. And just say to them, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Please put me on your do not call list. You may need to repeat the point a few times, and they may need to check with the supervisor because not all of them are necessarily aware of it.
Or invite them inside for the goat sacrifice.
Well, that's another route.
Just say, no, but would you like to join me for, we're sacrificing the goat downstairs.
But they do keep a list of people that don't want to be bothered. And if you ask, and you put on that list, they're not going to keep coming back. They may show up in like 5 years just to see, oh, hey, is the same person still living here? Okay, do you still not want us not to bother you? Okay, goodbye. Or they might show up in here. You may hear from them once a year at the most, just to see if because people move, somebody might be more receptive. But just treat them like human beings.
But anyway, now's a good time to give out the phone number.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that myself.
See if anybody wants to call in and join our conversation.
So, Brian, you want to give out the phone number?
Sure. 609-807-2492. That's 609-807-2492. I don't have it memorized like Kevin does.
I know, but I thought I'd pick on you.
Bad
for
with numbers. No, that's fine. As long as I can read it off the screen, I'm good. I couldn't quite see it from way up there.
I thought so. That's why I turned the screen to you. And there are literally thousands of other cults that are operating today in the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Some are very innocuous. Some are very dangerous. There's lots of other groups that are, are Mormons a cult?
Yes.
I would generally agree. Yes, they're and they have their own.
They have
scandals.
the status of a religion, but there's still. I still see very cult-like.
Is the church are Satanists a cult? And the answer is depends on which type of Satanist.
Yeah.
But most, and all these other groups, and again, many members of cults are not dangerous. Most of them are not dangerous. But, and for that matter, there's Seventh-day Adventists. They're not considered a cult anymore. When they started, they were. And they were convinced, in the 19th century, which I believe is when the 18th, 19th is when they started, they were convinced the end was nigh. And were gathering together to wait for the appointed day.
Still waiting.
And it's become more mainstream now. So you can certainly have something that is a cult that becomes a religion, something that is religion. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but it's probably there's probably examples of mainstream religion, of things that were once fairly mainstream. Actually, I can think of an example. With all due respect to my many neo-pagan friends, paganism arguably has made the transition the other way, because it was once, and again, no disrespect to paganism, the majority of pagan groups do not fit the Bite model or any other definition of a dangerous cult. But they have gone from being a very widespread religion to a much more insular, less publicly known. You don't wander around and see a lot of temples to pagan deities that are in active use anymore.
That's true. And you have all the various New Age cults too, not just
good heavens,
Christian ones. Things like the Order of the Golden Dawn and
the Solar Temple.
Yeah,
which is another one of the mass suicide cults that isn't talked about a whole lot. Particularly, I think, again, because the Solar Temple was less common in the United States and more prominent in Europe. But it was it was an 80s, 90s suicide situation. And again, this idea of secret knowledge, things they knew that other people didn't know. In 94, you had an infant child who was killed by the group center in Quebec. You had all these incidents, and this was 90s. People don't talk about it anymore, but it did happen, and it wasn't. It had Christian elements, but it wasn't. It was further. I believe it was further off mainstream Christianity than even, say, Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
Although I don't. Yeah, completely. And if anyone out there knows more about it than I do, feel free to chime in, because I don't know that one in particular. I just know I've seen it pop up a couple of times, and that hit into sort of another thing that overlaps with cults, which is your secret societies and your fraternal orders.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, the Solar Temple claimed to be the inheritors of the Templars, which pretty much every secret society on the planet claims to association with the Templars, including the least secret society in the history of secret societies, which is the Freemasons.
Yeah.
I mean, the Freemasons are an interesting and, to me, fairly amusing bunch. Not because they're all that wacky, because reality, the more I've learned about Freemasonry, the more it seems like it's just mostly an excuse for a bunch of rich people to get together and do Yeah, the rituals are rich people do weird things. It's
Mm-hmm.
they're not. It isn't that they are secretly running the world or secretly Satanists. It's that when you have a bunch of rich, powerful, and influential people that all gather together, they like to get the rich, the powerful, the influential like to get together. And when you have a bunch of
Well,
them
yeah, because they
hanging
have
out,
more in
yeah,
common with each other than they do with us poor people.
yes, and when they're all hanging out, people naturally start to assume something's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I'm sure there have
yeah.
been, backroom deals made
Oh,
during those
no
meetings
question.
and stuff. It's a networking opportunity.
Yes, it's no, but my point being is it's more this that it's just networking and a bunch of rich, powerful people all hanging out and having a beer,
Yeah.
as it were. Um, but again, they also claim descent from the Templars. In fact, as I understand it, they claim to modern people that claim to be Templars are usually a subsect within Freemasonry.
Mm.
Um, which is again goes to the point. Just because something resembles a cult, something is called a cult, doesn't make it bad. There's a great quote from Jesus himself that I think applies to most things and applies here. It's like, you know a tree by its fruits. If you want to see if it's something bad, look at what it does.
Yeah.
I mean, be careful just because lots of these examples, Joan Stebbing was poignant, didn't start out doing horrible.
Yeah. That's the problem.
I'm trying to think. Can you think of any other good examples of cults?
Um,
Particularly on the destructive end as opposed to the
Ku Klux Klan,
yeah. Oh, and there
most white supremacist groups.
a lot of white supremacist groups have very strongly religious motives. Most of them are Christian. Not all, though. The perversions of Norse paganism
Yeah, exactly.
are also very common.
Yeah, the whole Aryan bullshit.
The Aryan Brotherhood. There's also, and forgive me, I want to say Odinists.
Yeah, but what I mean is because of Hitler's,
Yeah.
Perversion of the idea of Aryan
Yeah.
supremacy and this myth of the Aryan Superman and all that.
Mm-hmm. And the clan very much acts like a cult. They have the ranks, the orders, that you have to keep it secret.
Mm-hmm. The
The
ceremonies.
ceremony, the seriousness of you keep your mouth shut about certain things.
Yeah. And for the most part, they're also, I mean, they ought to just be classified as a criminal organization and treated like the mafia rather than treated like some kind of social club.
I don't disagree with you. And there's ordinary courtesy, or extraordinary. There's a movie on Netflix I recommend people check out about a black man who hangs out with Klan members.
Oh, the Black Klansman.
No, is that
There was a movie
yeah?
recently.
That's not the one I'm thinking of. That's
Oh, are you talking about the documentary?
yeah. This is the documentary.
Oh, okay. Because there was
Daryl Davis is the man's name.
Okay, there was a movie. Yeah, there was a movie made about an undercover officer that actually infiltrated the Klan.
Yeah, Dixon's interesting because he's very public and he's a black guy who hangs out with the Klan and has gotten hundreds of them to give up their robes just by being a decent human being.
Which is great. Surprised he's still alive, honestly.
Well, that's how he's approached them. He just, the story, and you can see the documentary on Netflix. The way that he first got started with it was he's a musician, and he played blues and jazz, but it was a time period when nobody wanted to listen to blues and jazz, but country music uses similar themes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was playing country music in country bars, and he goes to a country bar and he's playing, and it's a break between sets, and this guy comes up to him and is like, "Hey, can I buy you? You play really well. Can I buy you a beer?" Like, "Yeah, sure," and sits down, and makes a comment. You're the only black person I've ever seen who could play as good as Jerry Lee Lewis. And like, yeah, Jerry Lee Lewis is a friend of mine. And then the other guy that he shared, the two of them are sharing a beer with Dixon, and it's like, I never thought this would be happen. I'd be sharing a drink with a black man, and they're both members of the KKK.
Hmm.
And like, okay, and he just hadn't had a conversation with them. And the thing that he discovered is a lot of the KKK members are deep south, and many of the ones he met didn't know any black people. All they knew was the stereotypes and the bullshit propaganda the Klan told them.
Yeah.
Actually, meeting one and finding out he wasn't a violent drug dealing thug changed their. And he never asks them to give up being members of the Klan. He just talks to them, and many of them can't do it anymore. And they give up their robe. He collects their robes. He wants to start a museum of them.
Nice.
But I would absolutely agree that the Klan's a cult. Another good example that we haven't touched on yet, and is also a cult. A good example of the fact that cults are not necessarily always religious and spiritual. Cults of personality.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was going to mention that.
The most obvious example, of course, being North Korea, and Kim Jong-un and his father, and the great, and Nazi Germany, although it had religious elements, and the worship of Hitler.
Oh, yeah. Chairman Mao.
Mao, and these people that are elevated to almost godlike status, sometimes without actual belief that their gods are messianic in any way, sometimes with it. Certainly Himmler treated Hitler like a god.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't have to be religious. Korea, or for that matter, Chairman Mao, communist China isn't particularly religious about how they do it.
No, they're very
everything.
not.
But the veneration they give to him strongly resembles a religious movement. Which is why it also gets into another example of why what is a religion, what isn't. It's a blurry line.
Yeah. Yeah, really, it comes down to a lot of times just state recognition.
Yeah.
Does the state recognize you as something legitimate, in which case you get to call yourself a religion, versus
it doesn't.
If you're not, you're a cult.
Which, and again, that also, the thing I like about that, as much as there's as many problems as there are, and there's many, is it doesn't put a necessarily negative connotation on being in a cult. It's like the state doesn't recognize what you do. It doesn't mean you're evil. It just may mean you're a group of 20 people that get together every week to worship the flying spaghetti monster, for example, isn't important enough for the state to take notice of you.
Right.
It's like, realistically, logically, and philosophically speaking, why would the state be the arbiter of what is and isn't a religion? That's where that definition falls apart.
Yeah. Well, it does the same thing with marriage and various other things that it's kind of like.
True. Realistically, the advice I have for people that if you think you're in a cult, take a step back, evaluate, question. There are a lot of the internet is full of resources. If you're worried about a member of your family being in a cult, and this is a legitimate concern, and there are excellent channels, and I'll talk about those in a minute. They give better advice than I can because we have 10 minutes left, and they dedicate entire episodes to this. But be loving, be supportive, try to steer them towards the critical information. Try to find, ideally, and this is really useful, I think, with Jehovah's Witnesses and the bigger ones, find former members of the cult to steer them towards. People that have been where they are and know what they believe and what they've been told. Because it's easier. I think you have a stronger case with a former insider's perspective.
Yeah. Well, they know the answers. They know what the leader's going to say. What the party line is.
Mm-hmm. But there's there are channels, like I said, that deal with cults more than we ever could, because that's not our main point. But John Cedars has a good channel, is a very good one. Out of Croatia, believe it or not. Telltale Atheist, like I said, I don't always agree with him, but he has a lot of good information about getting out of cults and how to help somebody get out of a cult and how to recognize that you're in a cult. And he has done a whole series of things with the bite model. That's where I first heard about it. Um, the information is available if you look for it. Although even there, you always want to be careful because there are groups that were at one time very much trying to help people out of cults that have since gotten kind of cultish in their own sense. There's also again cult even hitting some of these things isn't always a bad thing. Case in point, another group that we haven't touched on that ticks many of these criteria and fits most definitions of a cult, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Having been there,
yeah,
there are people that stay away from it because they do claim that it's a cult.
It is, and there's I've known people that have been helped by Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to say that yes, I think they do qualify as a cult, but remember what we said all the way back at the beginning and reiterated: cult is not necessarily a bad thing. It does help many people. I do have some serious issues with the way that courts mandate going to AA.
Yeah, well, it's kind of become the default. One of the reasons is because it's free.
Yeah.
The other stuff that's available usually isn't free.
True, but here's one of the other issues, and I don't want to get too far into the whole AA thing, but it is worth saying. AA has the same as a success rate as pretty much every other way of quitting, which sadly is about 1%. Addicts are almost guaranteed to relapse. The reality, the problem I think is that people tend to shoehorn. It's like you go to court, the judge will send you to AA. There are there are even other free options out there. I mean, I forget the name of it, but there is a group structured similarly to AA that's based on reason and rationality and keeps God and the higher power out of it entirely.
Oh yeah, there are
that I also believe is free.
AA.
Yeah. Well, this is a group that specifically isn't. It's not atheist AA. It's a different group.
Right.
Because the 12 steps have a strong spiritual component. I mean, there's no getting around it. And again, I'm not trying to trash on AA. Just things to keep in mind. And do your homework. And even AA members I've met, and it's one of the things in their favor, I think, will tell you, go to a couple of groups. Don't
find one that fits
you. Find one where you feel comfortable. And those are good things. There are good things about it, and it does help people. And I think the problem is shoehorning. Everybody does the same thing. It's like, do the research, look into your options, and find what will work for you on that front. But it is another example of, yes, it fits a cult. No, it's not necessarily, AA members are never going to wind up going and doing a mass suicide.
No, it's not a destructive cult.
No, not at all. But we are just about out of time at this point, so we should plug our other sponsor.
Okay.
So the other sponsor for the night, of course, is NordVPN. Internet security is a huge issue these days. Everybody buys everything on the internet. I mean, I just at work today for lunch I ordered offline.
Mm-hmm.
But internet security is a big issue as well because hackers are becoming more prominent. Identity thieves are more prominent. People are constantly trying to get your personal information. Heck, I just got a message through one of the various groups I'm a member of that claim to be the head honcho people, the people that ran it, saying that my credit card had been identified as fraudulent.
Oh yeah.
It's a common scam. Getting a virtual private network is one of the best ways to protect yourself, and one of the best options is NordVPN. So what basically is happening is you're getting onto Nord, and then from there you're getting onto the actual internet. So you're having an extra layer of encryption, which is a military-grade layer of encryption protecting all of your personal information. It has options all over the world. The prices are very affordable. I use it. Baron Voltage uses it.
Yep.
It's very effective. If you use it for 30 days and you decide this isn't for me, money back guarantee. And another advantage that it may be a little more scandalous to talk about, but as I personally like, is say you're living in China or another country that restricts where you can go on the internet.
Or just at work.
Or you're at work and you need look something up. Even you might need to look something up for a legitimate reason. I've had this come up where
Oh, there have been there are filters that block medical sites because they contain the word breast or
yeah,
something.
you know, you work in a hotel. Somebody needs to find the nearest hospital. Some stupid block because the hospital mentioned breast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something like that. You can use Nord to circumvent those things. You can use it to decide what country it looks like you're logging in from for people who are looking for your IP address. So if you want to see what the internet's like if you lived in England, you can do that. It's a lot of good options. It's a lot of protection, both from hackers and things like that, and even from the government and Big Brother watching you. Reasonable prices. Check it out. Link in the description below. You'll help out the channel. You'll help yourself out. You'll be glad you did. This is just about it. I mean, we got like 3 minutes, but it's a good time to wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to remind everybody again, 25th of May, and if you don't live in New Jersey, because we're a worldwide show, get a hold of me. The email's in the description, and we're going to have a streaming option. We're going to have an option for you to get the lectures later, and things like that, so you can still take part of this. And for the first time, it's only $10. It's a pretty good deal. That's going to do it for tonight. This is Kevin Mears saying good night and God bless.
Brian McKinley saying keep your fangs sharp.
Good night, everybody.